Hello all, welcome to my session, The Art of Customization of Possibilities with vRealize Operation. My name is Verghese Philippos. I am a staff technical account manager based in Dubai. I joined VMware in 2012 and had been managing customers in my region, Middle East, Turkey and North Africa over the last 7 years. And recently I was also engaged with other customers in other parts of EMEA as well, mostly for vRealize Operation. I'm also a member of CTO Ambassador program within VMware since last 2 years. So this session is all up to vRealize operation, and I'm not going to talk about what's new or the features or what are enhancements what you have in vRealize operation, but then it is all about how to make the best use of vRealize operations or VROps and get the customers utilized to the best out of it. So as you know, as a technical account manager or a TAM, my role is to show value to the customers, help them achieve value realization with whatever investment they had made on VMware. So during my last 7 years with the customers, what I found is VROps is a key tool or an important tool which can easily help us to show value with the customer and show them what they can best get the best out of the investment they have done with VMware. So this session I had presented at VMworld as a TAM Customer Central Deep Dive at VMworld 2019. So let's go into the session. If you look at the agenda, as I've mentioned, I'll be mentioning a lot more about how to use the custom contents within VROps, which is the power of, which is the actual power of vRealize operations. And then the best approach or the best recommendations, how to get this working, how to get the custom contents working within VROps. And I'm going to explain it based on the 5 case studies which I have picked up, 5 case studies from EMEA region which I have picked up, wherein these methodologies have been applied and had been successful. And in the end, we will summarize it, how we can take it out to the field, how it can take it out to the other customers as well. So vRealize operation, as you all know, helps us in our journey to proactive operations, or basically like helps in delivering self-driving operations from apps to infrastructure to optimize, plan and scale hybrid cloud and hyperconverged infrastructure deployments while unifying multi-cloud monitoring, right? So this is all powered by AI and ML. It helps IT to run production operations hands-off and hassle-free with a unified operation platform delivering continuous performance optimization, efficient capacity management, proactive planning, intelligent remediation, and integrated compliance. So each of these pillars, if you look into that, you have quite a lot of features loaded into there, and that's where it becomes what I tell my customers: VROps is a beast as when compared to the features and capabilities available. Now, when you have such a product and when you are not really skilled enough to operate that, what happens is you go into the product, you go into VROps, and then try looking around what I can use from it, right? So that may not really end up with the best results, because it is, as I've said, it is a beast with quite a lot of features. What I need to use out of it, what the best I can use out of it, depends on knowing what you really need to get out from the product. So this is all what I tell my customers. You go into VROps with the key things in hand, like what you really need to achieve. What are your use cases which you want to address with VROps? This is what I'm going to showcase in this session, talking about how I've done these with my customers. So as I mentioned, I tell my customers, go into VROps with what you really need to achieve. And then if you look at each of those use cases which I'm going to talk about, that falls into the initial questionnaire or initial planning, come up into 4 pillars. Okay, so how why this gets complicated is basically because of the custom. That you have custom dashboard, you have custom reports, you have custom views, and then supermetric, all of these things, right? So this is the real power of VROps. Whatever you want to get, whatever use cases you want to address with VROps, it is really possible. Most of them are possible, or either you can get up at least up to those use cases get delivered to the customers. Now, with all of these capabilities, you have get into a real confusing state wherein say, should I be using out of the box content? There are like hundreds of out of the box content available, out of the box reports, out of the box views, dashboards, all of those things. How do I know that these contents are really useful to me or really fitting me, or should I be making some changes to that? How can I use VROps for my specific use cases? I have some specific use cases coming from different teams. It could be my management, it could be a different team, app team, something like that. So how can I convert? How can I use those, get those team use VROps? Because if I need to get them use those, I need to make sure that I address their requirement through custom use cases, right? So should I need a, so I've seen the custom dashboard views report. What should I be using? What is the right thing for me? So how can I address my management tasks? Like this is more, we talk about a lot of metrics, lot of operations related tools, all of dashboards views all available now. How can I address my management tasks? They come up with specific asks for capacity management, capacity planning, cost of the environment. How do I address these kind of things, right? And what about supermetrics? I've heard about supermetrics. So why, when is it needed? Why is it needed? Is it really needed? So all of these questions ends up in a totally confusing state for the customer, because as I mentioned, it's like a beast. You have so much of features, capabilities. What should I buy? What should I be starting to use? How do I start to use, right? So my all of this going forward in this session, what we are going to see is my experience from the field and how I have consolidated, how I have used that into building that into specific steps to follow. I would say the right approach, planning for the use cases. So as when you get a use case for which need to be converted in the VROps, you need to ask specific questions. So the first question is, who is the target audience? So why is it important? Because it decides the level and content kind of information what you need to present in that content, right? And converting that into VROps, what does that mean for VROps? So for the VROps, this is going to be showcased to either infra team or the operations team or middle management or executive management. So depending on which what is the, who is the audience, we need to present that in a specific way, use a specific content for that. Now the next question what you need to ask is mode of presentation. So what does that mean? It means like it decides on the type of custom contents to the use. So is it one time? Do you want, is it just a one time presentation you need to show, so to show to them, or you need to schedule it? Do you need to schedule it for a specific time period of interval, or should it be a static view or static report, or it should be a dynamic view or dynamic report? So it all varies, right? So and based on these decisions, you need to decide on whether it should be a view, a dashboard, or report, or something else, right? So this second question what you need to ask, and then after that comes in like which object or resource need to be referred to. So why is this important? It decides on this answer to this decides which object should we use, or which should be looking in VROps to get the relevant information. And in VROps, what it translates to is an object within a VROps. Either it could be vSphere world, it could be a virtual machine, it could be a storage, it could be a cluster compute resource, data center, anything like that. But then you get an answer to that from this question. Now, and for the last and not but the least, but info, what kind of information you need to publish it, right? So this depends, this is important because you need to identify appropriate metrics to be used. Is there a inbuilt metric available related to this information? If you don't have a relevant information, you need to look at the supermetric, building a supermetric, which is nothing but a mathematical way of representing or manipulating the metrics what you have already have on the VROps. So this is the 4 questions you need to ask. And then once you have the answers to this, we will be able to build the right content to as to represent that use case. So let's get to our first use case. So first case study one where this was for a customer in EMEA. Industry was like they had been, it's a government customer, energy and utility company. So their use case was to have a one vSphere inventory dashboard with key information. So I'm not talking about multiple dashboard, one single dashboard. They need to have a single consolidated view of vSphere infrastructure inventory with interactive view of inventory mapping. And then along with that, each of those objects, they need to see the capacity metrics as well as the key performance metrics. So this is the question, this is the use case which we got, right? So this is where we start looking at how to get this converted into a custom content. So let's look at those questions. Our first question, target audience. So answer is it's for the infra and operations team, because this is where these team wants to know in one single view where they can get to see the entire infrastructure, and then how are they mapped, how is the key metrics for that, key metrics for both capacity and performance, right? And then the mode of presentation, of course it has to be a dynamic view because the information keeps changing, information needs to be updated. So it needs to be a vRealize operation dashboard where it keeps changing or where it can reflect the latest data always. Now, if you look at the resource and object, what kind of resource or object are we referring to? So we are referring to all the objects within vSphere world, which is vCenter server, cluster compute resource, host system, and virtual machine. So this is the answer which you got into that, right? So, and then what is the information to be published? The question is, the answer is already there in there, just because it needs to show the key performance metrics for each of these objects, as well as summary of the metrics for each object. They need to see the capacity values and all of those things. So we got the answers to this now, right? So we know it is going to be a dynamic dashboard with which should be keep updating the key information like capacity and performance metric, but also shows the interaction between all of those things. Now let's see how this was got run. So we started building the solution. So we understood it has to be a custom dashboard to be built with the following information. It needs to show list of vCenters, all the clusters, hosts, and VMs, then the list of all clusters with all the hosts and VMs related to that, and list of hosts with all VMs. So why these three are separate is just because I need to know when I select a vCenter, I need to see all the clusters, hosts, and VM related to that vCenter. As well as when I select a specific cluster, I need to see all the hosts and VMs under that cluster. Similarly, when I select a host, I need to see all the VMs under that. Okay, so this is where the whole the interaction, the widget interaction, all of those things will come into picture. Apart from this, they need the summary metrics for each of these objects, right? vCenter, cluster, host, as well as for the VM, they need to have all of those things, capacity metrics, as well as the performance metrics. So this is the and then performance metrics for each of the objects. So what they needed was CPU demand and memory demand. So this is where we started building all of this. So this was a summary of what we're trying to build. And next was identifying the metrics. So we got to know what needs to be built. We need to know the object, and then now we look at the metrics, right? So if you go into the environment and get into the all metrics for each object, like vCenter, then for the cluster compute resource, then for the host, and then for the virtual machine. So we were able to get all of those metrics out of the box built in with vRops itself. So we can directly use those metrics, CPU demand, memory demand, then the capacity metrics, inventory metric, all of those things are readily available. So we will straight away go in and use those things. Now, this is where we finally ended up with a dashboard with the complete view of inventory as well as these metrics. Now, I know there are not many people will like this dark theme of dashboard. That's why I have made that into the light mode as well. So you can have either of these modes available in vRops to showcase this. The dark mode is mostly what I've seen used in the big screens in the knock rooms or in the very big screens where you need to publish it outside at all. Okay, so let's look into detail of these dashboards. So if you see the first widget on the left hand top corner, you see the select the list of vSenders in there. So when I select the vSender, I get the list of clusters under that, similarly list of hosts under that, and list of VMs under that. So this gives you the complete inventory view. Same goes in for, if I go in and select the cluster, a specific cluster, I will get to see the hosts and VMs underneath that. Similar goes for the selecting the host, I will be able to see all the VMs under that. Okay, so now that is inventory. Now, similarly, when I select a specific object, especially if, for example, vSender, I'll be able to see the summary metrics for that specific vSender. In here, we were selecting the count of running hosts, count of VMs, total CPU cores available, total vCPUs provision, total memory available, and total memory provision. This gives me an approximate view of what are the resources available and what are the resources remaining. And for the last widget, what you will see is the key performance metrics, which is CPU demand and memory demand. So when I keep selecting each of those objects, this metrics will change, or these widgets will update based on the object which I select. Same thing goes for the vCenter. Same thing goes for the cluster, host, and virtual machine as well. You will get to see that all of those widgets down below, just beneath that, will get updated with the details of each of those objects. So this is how it works, right? So what was the key feature? I would say, what was the key feature we utilized of vRops to get up to this? That is widget interactions. So if you see this picture, it looks like a complicated picture, but then if you closely look into that, each of those widgets are have widget interactions with the other ones. So for example, the first one, select the vCenter widget, I have put the interactions onto the other three widgets, which are select the vCenter, select the cluster, select the host, select the VM, which means when I select an object in vCenter widget, it will automatically update the other three widgets. Similarly, going for the scoreboard widget as well as the metric chart, it keeps updating based on the objective. Okay, so how was this? This looks easy now, right? So if you go through those specific steps, you ask this specific question and you get it correctly, it becomes very easy to build a custom content based and exactly fitting into the use case. So let's look at the second case study now. So this is more not related to capacity or performance, but was the use case which came up was information for inventory and billing. So this is a customer in the airline industry based in EMEA, and they have a very large vSphere infrastructure. So recently they moved to a uh, uh, outsourced management as managed services by a third-party company. So which means a third-party company will managing their operations and vSphere infrastructure, and the customer would be paying based on the number of size of the resources what they manage. So the use case or the request what they needed, or what the data they needed from the vRops was, they want to have a monthly inventory of the whole environment and monthly bill to be calculated based on the inventory. This could be easy if you have all standard VM. For example, I have 100 small VM, 1,000 medium VMs, or whatever number of large VMs. Then it's easy. Like if you have a unit cost of each of those t-shirt sizes, it's easy to calculate. But then the complexity came in here because of the too many non-standard size VMs. So uh, even if you categorize a small VM, which could be like 2 vCPU, 4 GB RAM, those standard size VMs were way less, because most of their VMs were like either 3 vCPU, non-standard sizes. So that makes the billing more complex. So this is where we wanted to get use vRops on that. So by the way, we are not using the cost showback feature of VROps for this. We are just using the count of VMs and then the size of VMs, and then we were using a specific value to multiply it with to get an actual cost. So let's ask the questions now. So target audience, of course, this is costing, and they want the infrastructure management want to see this. So they want to see the number of VMs and then the number of CPU cores so that they can use their own specific values to calculate the cost. Mode of presentation, it need not be a dashboard. They just need a report, monthly report, so that they can take it out to the outsource team and then pay it out there, right? And then resource or object, it was very clear, virtual machine. They want to know the number of virtual machine. Now, what kind of information they need to publish? So it's mainly two things. The average count of running VM based on each sizing profile. So they have a specific sizing for small, which is not really exactly 2 vCPU, 4 GB, but anything less than 3 vCPU and then 4 GB RAM is classified as small VM. Similarly for medium, large, and XL. So we'll get into details of that. So that's one thing. And then the other thing was the count of vCPUs provisioned on all powered on VM. So need to have the count per each sizing profile. So it could be different for different environments, but then they wanted to have this specific count, the total count for each sizing profile, so that they can use that for the billing purpose. So this was very clear. So right, so let's start looking at how we build this, right? So first thing was they want to have the average count of running PMs based on each sizing profile. And how was this calculations being done? That is where the whole uh, calculation of whole process of how we get that custom content was working. So the details of monthly billing, if you look into details of the small VM, they were just using vCPUs to size their VMs. So a small VM is considered if it has CPU less than 4. Anything up to any vCPUs 1, 2, and 3 is considered as a small VM. And the medium VM is between having the vCPUs between 4 and less than 8. So 4, 5, 6, 7. So the large VM would be from those with the vCPU starting from 8 till 15. And then similarly, extra large is the VMs with vCPUs having anything more than 16 vCPUs. This is the classic classification of how they want to size or do the profiling of their VMs. This is specifically meant for costing purpose, right? And now when it comes to the cost, if you look at the small VM, I've given an example in the table. So if you have 70, count of small VMs is 70, and the cost of a VM is considered as X for a small VM, okay, small profile. The base vCPU count on which this cost is calculated is 2 vCPU. So which means they charge the cost of X for 2 vCPUs. And then we look at the total vCPUs available. So if you found the total vCPUs as 144, which means they are charging actually for 70 into 4, which is 140 vCPUs, they are charging X each, right? So, but then if you look at those costs, we will see 4 additional vCPUs available. So the cost of each extra CPU is calculated as $100. So that means you take the base cost of vCPU count and then multiply with the cost of vCPU, and then also you need to add the extra cost. Additional vCPUs also you need to add the per CPU cost. That's where the total cost will come into. This is where it gets complicated, right? So you need to ideally look at the number of average count of VMs, also the count of vCPUs, and then subtract it from the actual number of vCPUs it is supposed to be provisioning along based on that base vCPU count for each profile sizing. So how did we get this working? First of all, we identify the objects. So we need to have the custom groups, because we cannot classify or we cannot create a group with there is no cluster or there is no specific cluster wherein you'll put in the specific sizing of the VM, right? So we created a custom group. We created 4 custom groups, in fact. For example, EK small VMs, if you see in there, in the properties, we say that this vCPU from that's one of the properties available in a virtual machine object. I can say the number of CPUs provisioned is less than 4, and then also I've put in like the power state is on and specific thing, right? So and the runtime connection is connection. So this is basically like segregating or logically grouping VMs which are having vCPUs less than 4. Similarly, the medium VMs, what we have done is look at the vCPUs, and then if the vCPU number of vCPUs is greater than 3 and less than 8, it is classified as a medium VM, right? And same thing goes for large and extra large VMs as well. Large VM was any VMs with vCPU greater than 7 but less than 16. So between 8 and 15 vCPUs, it is calculated as large VM. Similar for the extra large, anything more than 15 vCPU classify as the extra large machine. Now the VMs are grouped, right? So we have the grouping, we have 4 custom groups which will reflect or which logically groups these VMs based on the profile sizing. Now we identify the metrics what are needed. So what are the metrics needed? We want the count of running VMs, that is average for a month. So count of running VMs for that specific group, and also the total number of provisioned vCPUs in running VM. So we go into all metrics, look at the container because it's a custom group, that's an object. And if you go in and look at those metrics, you will see that you're not able to find the count of running VMs metric or vCPUs provision on the running VM. So these are not available on that specific VM. But then you know very well all of those custom groups contain virtual machines, and each of those virtual machine has these metrics available. Number of VMs we can easily count if we have on that thing, right? So what do we do? The metrics are not by default available. So that's where the solution for that is using supermetrics. So what is supermetrics? Supermetric is nothing but a mathematical representing or form converting a existing metric with a mathematical expression. For example, here, for that custom group, you will know number of VMs running into that, right? I can count the number of VMs within that group. So that can be a supermetric. I can use the operator called sum or count within that. Similarly, I know there are VMs within that custom group, and that I know each of those VMs will have a metric called number of provisioned vCPUs. So I can, if I sum up all the metrics from all the VMs under that group, I'll be able to get the total number of provisioned vCPUs on the running VMs of that custom group. So that's what we did. So supermetric, one of the most powerful features of vRealize operation, getting running if you know how to build a supermetric, you open up a lot of opportunities of what you want, what you can achieve with vRops. So if you see here, the formula is nothing but sum of virtual machine and then all the vCPUs. Virtual machine provision vCPU is a metric, and then I sum it up. I use the operator of sum within the supermetrics and then get that value in there. Similarly, if you look at the summary of number of running VMs, again you get the count of running VMs on that specific object, which is basically the custom group. So I get these two things, right? So now it's easy. Now I have all of those things and easy. And then finally I get to a report like this, wherein I categorize the VMs with the custom group. Yeah, you'll say EK small VMs, total vCPUs available, total memory provisions, and total VMs. So now as an infrastructure manager, I know how many VMs, average VM should I be counting in or paying for. 543, I have the small VM. I know what is the base cost of a small VM. Also, I know what is the total vCPU, and for a total VM of small VMs, I count it as 543, and then each of those standard sizing for a small VM is 2 vCPU, which means I'm just paying. I'm actually, when I pay for the base cost of that small VM, I'm paying for 543 into two vCPUs. So anything more than that, I will pay an extra. So I have created an additional report on showing that difference using that supermetric as well. So this is the final report for billing, how we get to that. So as you have seen, like it is, if you look at the use case and then go through those 4 questions and answer those and then get those two things, it gets easy, or it makes your way clear of getting that outcome clear on that. So let's look at the third case study, which is purely based on the cost show back. Again, this is a customer in EMEA in the aviation industry. So this customer had been wanted to use the cost show back for the VMware infrastructure using the cost show back capabilities available in vRealize operation. So what they wanted was a daily cost of VMs, and then monthly cost of VM, and also infrastructure cost details to be available for the executive reference. So they have the CIO had a big dashboard on his in his room, wherein he was putting in the costs of running the infrastructure, not just for VMware or vSphere infrastructure, but also for the entire infrastructure, is network infrastructure, all of those things. So this was just going to be one of the dashboard which will be using for the showing the cost. So he want to see the daily cost. He also want to see a graph where the cost of each of those VMs or infrastructure. It could be a VM, it could be a cluster, it could be a vCenter, whatever, or a data center. But you need to see in granularity each of those things and the trend of growth of the costs. Okay, so this is where the actual requirements came in, and we started. Let's ask the questions now. So target audience, of course, it's executive and infrastructure management. So it is not, they're not going to look at each of the details of the metrics or anything. They just want to see the cost. That's their use case, right? And then mode of presentation, they want to see a report. Of course, the report has to go monthly. It has to be sent to the executive team monthly, but also they need to have a dynamic dashboard where they could see the cost of each of those objects per month or per day or whatever thing. Per day is the most key thing where when we were asked to work on specific thing, right? And now which objects to be monitored? Of course, it's virtual machine, which has to be summed up to the other objects as well. But then the key use case was showing it per virtual machine so that they can see what are the costs of running an application or whatever thing, right? And what kind of information to be published? Daily cost of VMs and components, CPU, memory, storage, and applications. So each of those VMs had different components which they want to segregate it: CPU, memory, storage, and application. So this information what he gets, he's going to correlate into another tool, which is Splunk was another tool which they use for segregating all the information from the wider infrastructure. They have huge infrastructure covering the network devices, monitoring devices, all of those things. So Splunk was taking into all of those things, and then this information, what you see, daily cost for each of those VMs and each of the components of the VM will be pulled into in the Splunk bigger dashboard as well. So we have the answers. So let's see how we got to do that, right? So we know what you want. We need a report and a dashboard. Now, identifying the metrics of the VM. So basically, it's the cost metrics. So we have built-in cost metrics within VROps. So we go in and look at that. And if you see the screenshot on the screen, you will see that all the costs are available as MTD, which is month to date. So which means anytime if I go in and look at the metrics, I will see the cost of that object, cost of that component from the first of that specific month. So if I go in and look at 15th of a specific month, I will see the cost from first of that month to 15th. I won't be able to see the daily cost. And if you go at the end of the month, you'll be able to see from first of that month to the end of the month. So this is how the cost metrics work in VROps, right? So this was not what they wanted. So built-in metrics are month to date, but then that's not what they wanted. They wanted to get daily costs. Now, how do we achieve this? We found that we can use a capability or feature called transformation within the custom views in VROps. Let's see how it can be done, right? So if you if you create a view, you have a place where you can set the time settings. So I'm going to use relative time range of data range of last 3 days. I will take the cost metric, but then I'm going to use the relative date range of 3 days. And then next, what I can use is I can in the custom in the views I can go into the advanced settings, and there I will see a column a specific tag called transformation. And the transformation, I can select multiple options. One of them is expression. Expression is basically like putting in a formula, or and what formula I used is last minus first. I will tell you how why we use that, right? So transformation, these are the transformations which options available in custom views, and you will see I selected expression, and then there are the first and last also available. So why this becomes valuable for me is, so the month to date cost values are listed for the last 3 days. I selected the time settings, month to date cost value, metric is month to date cost value, and then selected the time period as last 3 days. So which means that will be giving me the value since last 3 days. And the first value is the cost on day one, because I selected last 3 days. The first day is considered as the first value, and then the last value is the day three. So I have day one, day two, day three costs, the metrics available, and I have the first value and last value. And if I find the difference between first and last value, I will get the cost of day two. So that was as simple as that, right? So it is just a mathematical way of translating whatever you have in VROps. I select the 3 days metrics. The first and last day, if I subtract, I will be able to get the cost of that second day. So this is what we use for the daily cost. So once I have that, it was so easy, right? I can select, I can give the list of VMs, and then basically I can see the daily costs, daily memory cost, daily CPU cost, daily storage cost, and total cost daily. So at these points, these values were used for plotting into a chart as well. So I could show a chart showing the cost of each of those components of VMs per day, and then how it was reflecting, how it was changing over the day. Is that easy? How did it go with that, right? So let's go into the case study 4 now. This is a specific use case related to sustainability and what you gain out of virtualization by saving energy saving. So I would like to call it as go green with virtualization. So this customer is a government customer in EMEA and had been into the energy and utility sector, right? So they had been driving a nationwide initiative of reducing carbon emission and by reducing the electricity usage. So as a support to this, IT want to show something from what they have achieved from virtualization as well. In fact, they rolled out one of the key goals or key reasons of rolling out virtualization 10 years back was to reduce the electricity consumption by data center consolidation. So they achieved that, but then how do you showcase that, right? So they have these nationwide initiative, and if they could showcase this capability, this savings, what I've done with the virtual infrastructure by virtualization, the energy savings by virtualization, that would be awesome. So this was the ask which they came in with. They want to showcase how IT contribute to this initiative of energy saving through virtualizing data center workloads. So let's go in and ask the questions. Target audience, it is executive management. They just want to see how much savings they did. They don't want to see details of any other detail, but then how much they saved with virtualization. And mode of presentation, it has to be a dashboard, because they're just going to showcase this. They don't want a report or anything, but then a dynamic view of dashboard which keeps updating with the most recent values. And the object, yep, they want to see it per cluster and also as per the data center as well. They don't need to see anything below that, but then whatever savings they do on the data center level or at the vSphere cluster level. And what is the information they needed? power savings and related cost savings with virtualization. This was very, very clear. So what we needed was very clear from this, right? So let's look at how this was done. Now we know the object, what is needed, and next thing what we first need to look at is look at for the metric, right? So do we have those metrics? So we have power metrics available in vRealize operation, which is power in watts and energy in joules. And then how do we calculate the savings from virtualization? So vRealize operation of your apps can give you the power consumption of ESXi host, which can be used for converting that to energy consumption for a virtual machine. Now, if I was not virtualized, if I have 100 VMs currently, if I was not virtualized or was not using virtualization technology, each of these 100 VMs would have been a physical server. If not the big physical servers as ESXi host, at least a mid-range physical server. So if I was not virtualized, I would have been running 100 physical servers, right? So in that way, if we think about that, power consumption after virtualization would be my current consumption of all ESXi hosts. But if power consumption in the scenario if I have not virtualized would be the average power consumption of a mid-range server into the current number of VMs, because you would be having that many number of physical servers if you are not virtualized. So this was the basic thinking what they want to see, right? And how did we get that? Yes, super metrics again, right? So I have the metrics of power and uh, power in watts and energy in joules. I could convert that into the power saving, power consumption, if not virtualized. So first supermetric, what they did is like power consumption, if not virtualized, which means the number of VMs, which would be translated to which would be the number of physical servers, and then we use 100 watts as an average power consumption of a physical server. So which means power consumption of the environment, if it was not virtualized in kilowatt, would be number of running VMs multiplied by 0.1, which translate to 100 watts, which is zero point 0.1 kilowatt. So now I know the power consumption of all ESXi hosts, right? It's already there in VROps. So then what would be the power savings after virtualization? I have this value already calculated, power consumption if not virtualized. I will subtract the value of current power consumption from that to give me the power savings. And once I have that power savings, I can calculate the cost savings because I know the value of each unit of power, which is in kilowatt hour. I know the cost of I've taken the value of like $0.102. So when I have the power savings, I multiply that with that unit cost to give me the cost savings of virtualization. So these were, and we did few other supermetrics as well, looking at the cost, ideal VMs, all of those things. But then basically it was running on this now, right? Now, once I have those values, what did we do? We just built a dashboard. So if you look at the first on the left hand corner, this talks about the count of physical servers required, which is actually the number of currently running VMs. So that is if it was not virtualized, that would have been the number of physical servers. And then the total power usage by servers, that is the supermetric which I use for calculating that. So this gives me the power consumption if I was not virtualized. At the same time, on the right hand side, if you see, you'll see the count of physical servers, count of virtual machines. This is the current situation, which I get directly from VROps. And since I have both of those things, I know the power consumption while if not virtualized, and then the power consumption current one, and which I subtract and give me the power savings. So that is what you saw in here, and I convert that into the cost savings by multiplying it by the unit cost of the power. This was, I would say, the version 1.2 dashboard which we created to show them capabilities of virtualization, right? We kept on improvising that, and then we recently built in like another environmental savings dashboard as well. Again, this had some supermetrics which had to be there. So if you see on the left hand side, you will see the power consumption before virtualization and power consumption after virtualization also translate to the monthly saving, and it can also show the daily power consumption rate. The violet line gives you after virtualization, and then the rose one gives you the before virtualization. Same thing goes for the carbon emission values as well. So once I have the power consumption in kilowatt, I can convert that into a carbon emission. Again, it is just a mathematical calculation. I use Supermetrics to convert to that. So this was the environmental savings dashboard we created. Another dashboard which we created was power utilization per cluster. So each of those green box shows about each cluster and then what is the power consumption for that particular cluster. And again, I have another widget which talks about, I select one of these cluster and it will tell me what are the top 10 VMs which are consuming the most power in that. And again, power consumption per each of those small box in the widget down below is a VM, and then you can see the color coded the color coded VM objects based on the power consumption. If it goes beyond a particular threshold, we used to color code it, convert that into another color, orange, red, like that, and that's how we used to showcase this. So this was really effective. This was very helpful, and the CIO is using these dashboards in his room, wherein it's showcased on a bigger screen, and it was really aligning with their drive for nationwide initiative, aligning with their nationwide initiative of power consumption and energy savings. So how did it all happen? It's all with the supermetrics. So these were the supermetrics which were used to get these things working. So, and these supermetrics are, if you really closely look into that, these are not very complex ones. These are like pure mathematical calculation of multiplying it with a standard value, multiplying it with a unit rate, whatever be that. So it was not very complicated one, but then this is how it works. So as I've told you, if you don't have a specific metric in there, if you can convert it with a mathematical expression, supermetrics is the way to go about this. Okay. And these dashboards had been very useful, had been asked by so many customers, and this is published through one of my blogs. You can search for this particular blog at VMware blogs, and then you will be able to download this and use this in your environment as well. Okay, so now let's look at the fifth case study, and that was knock room dashboards. So this was for a customer in EMEA who had been into the banking and financial segment, and they have several monitoring tool in the knock room, but then for the vSphere infrastructure, they want to use vRealize operation. And then the use cases what they were given was the knock team should be able to proactively monitor the vSphere infrastructure, and also they should be alerted for any health, performance, capacity issue to the knock team, and knock team in turn will be notifying it to the VMware admins. So this was the use case which had been given. So now if let's go in and ask the questions, right? So who's the target audience? Knock team. Mode of presentation, of course, there is nothing else other than dashboards, because they are going to see it in the rolling screens, wherein it will keep changing and they will be able to see on that. Now, what are the objects we should be looking at? Of course, all object in vSphere infrastructure, because NOC team will be will have to monitor everything in their vSphere infrastructure. Now, what is the information to be published? So NOC team has to proactively monitor health and performance issues and environment. So they need to really look at the health and performance metrics for each of those environments. Now, let's look at how did we build the solution, right? So first thing was create a NOC user with appropriate privileges, because this need not be a normal user. This has to be a user who just need to have views read-only permission to the dashboards, and also identify dashboards useful for NOC team. It could be an out-of-the-box dashboard, or it could be the custom dashboard. And the dashboards ready for big screen that need to be proactively monitored. So they may not have so many, even if we select like 10 or 15 dashboards which could be useful for NOC team, we cannot have 15 screens to showcase that, right? So we need to keep it rolling so that on a specific interval, so that it keeps the NOC team gets monitored on that. So I'm just going to show a few dashboards which were really useful and which were used. So this was the SDDC management health overview, which looks at the health of each of our vSphere SDDC products, and then give you the health of each of those component. It also looks at the services and shows the health of each of those services. This was really very useful for NOC environment. This is another which talks about the top end VMs with CPU consumption, CPU demand, memory, and all of those things. Also the health, and again the host. This is again the host base. Each of those boxes or the is a host and it shows about the health of each of those hosts, right? And another dashboard which was heavily used was the KPI for availability dashboard. They'd look at ESXi availability, VM availability, and each of those boxes are color coded based on the errors or availability percentage of those things. And also it will talk about top 20 VMs with low availability, and then top 15 ESXi with higher availability. So this is again just one of those dashboards which were used to them. And then another one was executive dashboard, which were used in the knock screen as well, which talks about, because when an executive or when a management executive walks in and he need to see the environment with a general overview, this is what they were using it. So it gives you the overall inventory, count of vCenters, count of data centers, count of VMs, all of those things. And then for each of those clusters, they could see the capacity remaining, and then the workload utilization on each of those clusters. Are they underutilized? Are they overutilized? Or they optimally utilize, all of those things? And also like the vCPU provisioning and capacity history for each of those objects as well. Now, another one was a big dashboard, which again shows about the count of VMs, count of CPU provision, all of those things, and also the workload utilization across the clusters, virtual machine, and then the host system as well. So ideally, the NOC team would be looking at how many of the objects are in the overutilized category, which means they need to look at something reducing the overutilization, so that's a proactive way of avoiding any issues coming into that. Similarly, also the underutilized, monitoring the underutilized means why are they underutilized, it's wastage of resources, and then moving into the optimized way of balancing the workloads between each of those hosts or resources, whatever. Then another one was the VM performance dashboard. It talks about the top 25 VM with CPU ready, CPU memory, all of those things. So this is another one. So they can see these VMs which would be proactively monitoring these VMs for specific thing. Now, another most widely used NOC dashboard was the capacity remaining on each of those clusters. These are color coded so that it tells about like when a cluster capacity of a cluster reaches a threshold or breaches a threshold, it changes the color code and they can see it straight away in the dashboards. So now these are few dashboards which we are talking about now. Rolling dashboards, we have a capability of reordering or auto switch dashboards. You select those specific dashboards and then put in the auto transition to a specific time period. The default is 300 seconds. You can change it to lower or higher value, whatever thing, and then talks about you create a cycle of these auto transition between whatever number of dashboards. So I have the customer who is running like 15 dashboards in the knock room. So it keeps rotating between these 15 dashboards. And then the user, you need to have a user created, which need not have other permissions other than read only, and then view the dashboard. So, and then share it with those dashboard group, and that's what I think. So we talked about 5 scenarios, right? Each of those 5 scenarios, you might have seen, like we asked standard questions, 4 standard questions, and then that's where we started off building those custom content. So to summarize that, first you look at who is the target audience, and then based on that, based on that answer, we get the other questions also made it ready for the rollout for the other things, right? So and then the next one is the type of content, what kind of content is needed. Is it a dynamic content, static content, or is it a dashboard view or whatever thing? And then the object to target, what kind of object you want to see the metrics, whichever object you want to monitor, whichever object you want to showcase. And then at last but not least, what kind of metrics to be used? Is the metrics available out of the box, or is the metrics, if the metrics is not available, can we do a super metrics to do that? So if you go step by step into each of these questions and then get the answers, you would be able to easily build out a custom content within VROps to address those use cases. This is where we want all the customers all the times to go in and then look at this and then follow these steps so that you can easily build up all of those things. All the lot of custom contents are available in code.vmware.com, where is the repository of the custom contents available, custom dashboards, supermetrics, custom views, and all of those things. But then you can use all of those, but then first you need to know what kind of object or what kind of custom content you need. And if every customer uses this, follows this, it would be really useful. And then if the customers are able to utilize all of those capabilities, that would mean that we get to a point where we are able to show the value for these customers, value realize, help them with the value realization, whatever their investment they have done on vRealize operations. So that's all I want to share. Thank you for listening to this. Hope this was useful. Please reach out to me if you have any queries, if you need any help with any of these things. Thank you.